Welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the show where we talk about finding strength when life falls apart. I'm your host, Melly, and around here, resilience isn't perfection. It's falling flat, getting back up, and maybe laughing about it later. From breakups to breakthroughs, we mix faith, neuroscience, and a little sass to help you rebuild a life that actually feels like yours. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. My guest today has a powerful transformation story. Naeem Fazal grew up in a Muslim family in Kuwait and came to the U.S. after the Gulf War, where he had a life-changing encounter with Jesus that completely altered the direction of his life. He's now the founding pastor of Mosaic Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the author of several books, including Ex-Muslim and his newest one, Tomorrow Needs You. In it, he takes us on a journey from fear to faith, and honestly, it feels like a masterclass in hope. Naeem, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. And man, a masterclass of hope. Wow, I love that. Can I steal that? That's really great.
Absolutely. Feel free. So I wanted to start our conversation with this powerful idea that was in your book where you said knowledge can change us, but stories have the power to transform our lives. I just really love that because I know that for so many folks listening, they have possibly read a lot of books, maybe, heard a lot of sermons and gotten a lot of head knowledge about things, but transformation can feel really hard to actually grasp. So what do you think it is about stories that have that unique power to shift our hearts and not just our minds?
Yeah, great question. So I think of the movies we love and we get into, right? So when you're watching a movie, I don't know about you, but I kind of find myself going, okay, I'm going to be this person in this movie subconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be this person, or I think I could be this person, or you aspire to be a certain kind of character in a movie, right? We all do,
Right.
I would think.
Yeah.
And depending on the movie, obviously, depending on the movie. But usually we get wrapped up in stories. And I think part of that is the seeing possibly yourself in someone else. And so when people share their stories, their real life stories, what happens to us, though, is that we find ourselves in their story. We find that there is a possibility of us actually having a story or an ending like theirs. And that's the big difference between, I believe, stories and just information, because information informs us, and that's what it tells us. It tells us this is what happened, this is what's going on. But it's when you get wrapped up in people's real life stories, you get something from hearing kind of information that is not found in just basic information. It's in storytelling. So when you think of, you could communicate information either, as is realistically, or you could do it with hope. Stories, I feel like, are information. They're wrapped up in hope. And hope, naturally just calls us and pulls us forward in life. That's the one thing hope does. And so I think that's the big difference, And also, this idea of truth. You've heard, truth will set us free and truth will set you free. But I think it's a little bit complicated because I think knowing the truth doesn't set you free. It's actually practicing the truth sets you free. Just knowing something that's true about information gives you more information, makes you more knowledgeable. But honestly, transformation and the process of healing of any kind comes from when we practice and live out truth, and we actually do it for ourselves, or we engage in the process of healing. And I think stories give us a picture of what an actual transformation healing process looks like, because we find ourselves wrapped up in other people's stories. Does that make sense?
Totally. I love that. Yeah. And it's that personal connection with a story that you resonate with. In fact, it's a little unrelated, but I had a conversation about a week ago with someone who was, asking what I did. And I was talking about the podcast. And she said, "Oh, I work for a company that's creating AI podcasts. So you don't even have to be on it anymore. It'll just make up, it knows everything AI knows and it'll just do a podcast." And I'm like, but what about stories? Where's the personal connection that people are going to have with, the
Yes.
host or the guest? So totally. That is, I think, what people are kind of missing when it comes to that part of it is, it's I want to hear, sure, I want to know the steps to overcoming grief for sure. That's important. But I also want to hear from people who have overcome it. And I want to hear
Yes.
from people who are on the other side of it and give me that hope and that peace, knowing
Yeah.
that there is something coming better. So, yeah,
No,
totally.
that's great. You know, it's funny you say that because there's buddy of mine. He started a financial advising business, and he did the same thing. He took all his material, put it in AI, and it generated a podcast. And it was like two people talking, and it was good, giving people all the information that he put down actually on paper. Now it's a format of a podcast. And yeah, it was kind of eerie, honestly. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is kind of crazy." But you know what it is, though. I think the big difference is like the stories. Whenever you have actual humans involved in giving out information, there is the sense of we're not perfect, and I think that again it makes us human. This idea of like we're not perfect, we don't get it all correct, and so when you have AI or something else give you information is based on like okay, just be efficient, give them clear communication. And stories are messy. Stories are always imperfect. Stories always involve either telling too much about one thing or not enough about the other thing, you know? And so, yeah, I think I love it. I love the fact that even as humans, that when we communicate really hope in stories, we always leave people wanting more information. And I think that's what engagement is. You know, that's what life is supposed to be. Our lives are supposed to be like that. You know, they're messy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there is like beauty in that mess too, kind of
Oh
the
yes.
diamonds and the dumpster fires.
Yes, I love that. Now, what I want to ask you, where did you get that from?
I'd written a blog post where I used it. This was like a couple of years ago, and I used it as just like an analogy. And then as I was thinking through, what I wanted this podcast to be about, that just the phrase just like came to mind. I'm like, oh, that's right. I used that, and I'd put it on my website in a couple spots, and then I just started testing it out with people. Like, hey, I'm thinking about starting this podcast called Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, and everybody was like, "Ooh, I love that! I want a
Yes,
shirt that says that," or like so.
yes, you definitely need to have merch.
Thanks. So, one of the things that a line in your book that I highlighted and I wrote down in my notebook because I resonated so deeply with this is where you said, I love God, but sometimes I don't trust him.
Hmm.
I think a lot of us live in that place after heartbreak or tragedy or really any kind of trauma that we experience. How do we start moving toward trusting God again when life has basically shattered our sense of safety?
Wow, man, this is that's a tough one. That's a hard question. It's I would say I don't know. What I mean is that I don't know people's individual stories, right? I don't know what they've gone through. I don't know the period of time it takes for people to get to the next step of actually realizing what has happened. It's like
Mhm.
when you get hit in an accident in traffic or something. If you get sideswiped or something, there's times where your car is still spinning. This
Yeah,
thing is still happening. And sometimes time slows down. And sometimes in life, when you get hit so hard, like a betrayal takes place and it happens all of a sudden, you get hit so quick that you don't, and then the things start moving so fast around you that you don't have time to really understand what's going on. And sometimes after you know maybe a really terrible relationship coming out of one, or maybe a sad one, you just don't know when you stop spinning. And I think God is okay with you waiting till you stop spinning to really have a conversation with him. Does that make sense? Because I
that
think
does.
some people look at situations, they look at other people's things that have happened to them, and they go, well, you should do this by now. Or like, hey, enough time has passed. I know even my own sister, with her, and I talk about her in my book, and her losing her husband, it was so quick that it took her years to stop spinning. And everybody else wanted her to take months and be done, you know? And
Right.
and so back to your question, when do you start? How do you move? Well, you move when you're ready, first of all. Well, you move when you're ready to kind of go, okay, I'm going to start trusting you. That's why the scriptures talk about how, that we don't have a high priest that is not sympathetic. to our weaknesses. And what's really important about that passage is that we have to understand that God is okay with our emotions. When you think of some of these guys in the Old Testament that we read about, I mean, Moses, for example, I mean, he does something. It's a lot of it is his fault. And then he goes to the desert and he keeps spinning for 40 years. I mean, for 40 years, he's still spinning in a sense until he has a burning bush experience. And then he has to decide what to do here. So did Moses trust God for 40 years in the desert? I don't know. I don't know. All I do know is that it took a long time and God was okay with it. And I think sometimes in the Christianity that we hear, or that some of the sermons we hear from guys like me, pastors, there seems to be like a, hey, don't take too long, like get
Yeah.
on with it. And the phrase delayed obedience is disobedience. Have you ever
Hmm.
heard that? I don't know if that's true. I know it sounds catchy, but I don't know if it's true. Does that make sense? I mean, this is really raw, but I mean, I know I'm supposed to forgive this person who betrayed me, and I'm not there yet,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't think God's saying, well, you've been holding on to this thing for 2 years. You've been living in bitterness and living in sin. I think God understands. Hey, this ripped your heart out. Maybe you're going to be a little bitter for maybe a couple of years. Maybe God's okay with that.
I do feel like we're almost pressured to like wrap up our pain with a bow and say, "Oh, I'm fine." And it's more for others. I feel like, when I went through my divorce, it's been over 4 years and I still struggle with a lot of things related to it. But I can't always admit that to everyone. I have people in my inner circle who I can be really real with. But
Mhm.
for some people who just, maybe don't know me that well, it's like they want to just see, oh, she's fine. Especially, I'm hosting a podcast
Mm.
about healing. And it's like, I feel this pressure to be like, I'm fine. But yet there is kind of a power in admitting, like, hey, I'm still struggling myself. And like, we can wrestle with these things and talk about them and admit to God that we are having these issues.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, how long were you married for? And how long did you know this person?
We had dated for about a year before we got married. So I really only knew him for 15 years, but married for 14. And
I stop and say,
yeah,
15 years. Yeah, you can't be over someone in 4 years.
no,
No. They were wrapped 15 years, and it wasn't and also depending on, like, even if you go back to even our psychology of things, like, there's a certain group where it's formative years of our lives. So, okay, you might know someone 15 years from 75 to 90. Okay, that's one thing,
yeah,
but you didn't know this person from 75 to 90. You knew them earlier on, so in
yep.
your 20s and 30s. So I'm saying you're still growing. You're still forming, learning, and becoming more human and becoming into the person you're supposed to be. Everything is developing. And when you are in a relationship with a person that you are co-developing, in a sense, both are growing up at the same time, that attachment is a lot bigger and a lot stronger and deeper than one if you had, you know, found someone and you're 90 years old and you go to 155 or something, whatever. It's
Yeah.
different. And so, yes, yes. I mean, I think what I love about God is that He loves to see us grow. Like, He doesn't mind growth, as in, we hate it. I hate it. I hate, like, watching things grow. Like, I'm like, come on, get on with it.
Yep.
And He just loves watching it. I mean, I just think of Jesus as a kid. What made him go, okay, you know what? I got a game plan. Why don't you go down and, show him, tell him who I am. We'll start with you as a baby. And I
Yeah.
wonder if there was ever a conversation, where Jesus was like, how about I start, I don't know, maybe in my 20s?
Yeah.
Why do I need to really be a baby? But God was like, okay, with waiting for so long, not 5, not 10, not 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years until He was like, okay, now.
That makes a lot of sense. And another area I think that a lot of people struggle to even admit is when it comes to fear. And You talk in your book not about just, obvious fear, but subtle forms of fear like worry or discouragement. And I like how you describe it as something that doesn't just control us, it actually causes self decay. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Like what's interesting about fear is that for me, it's very unique. So I in my book I talk about how, for me, I did not realize I had a learning disability. And so the biggest angst in my life, like the thing that caused me the most amount of anxiety was school, academics. I mean, I
Mhm.
would dream about the day that I had stopped going to school because I was not good at it at all. And I didn't understand. And people thought I was just honestly just not smart, or I was lazy, and I just tried so hard and I couldn't get it together. And so my anxiety started off there when it came to academics, and then it just moved over to, like, am I ever going to make it in life? Am I going to be smart enough or being able to function in life? And so, and then I realized as I got older, this fear keeps on transforming itself and morphing itself and invading other areas of my life as well. So there's always this kind of fear. It's always around. It's always around.
Mhm.
And so, and when I came to faith in Jesus, and people would say, God has not given us a spirit of fear, so no fear, man. You just got to believe that God's given you a spirit of, not a spirit of fear. And so there was a sense of, like, you fight fear with faith. So the amount of faith and believe you have in God, that's the way, that's how you fight fear in your life. And so it was all about, man, you can do all things through Christ. Believe, man, you can do all things through Christ. So when you face your fears, you got to do this. You got to step out in faith. You got to do this. If you believe in your heart, and confess with your mouth. There's this whole big emphasis on faith. And what I realized, and I wrote about in my book, is that faith is not the solution to fear. It's actually love. Love is the solution to fear, according to the scriptures. It's always been love and always will be love. So in First John, it says, perfect love casts out fear. And he's talking about this idea of God's love being perfect, and that if that perfect love envelops you, and he says, if you still feel a sense of fear, it has to do with this idea of punishment, and it proves that God's love is not perfected in you. And then he says, you love because God still, we can love because God loves us first. I've, all that to say, number one, like realizing that when it comes to fear in our lives, God gives us a love that is very unique. He gives us a love that does not grow. It's not based on any condition. So what that means is he's saying, let me tell you how I'm going to love you. You don't have to ever make me proud. I'm already proud. That's how I love you. I'm not waiting for you to do the right thing. You already bring me great joy. I don't need you to always resist every temptation and be perfect because I love you perfectly. There is this, like, removal, this huge removal of performance.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need you to always act the right way. I don't need you to always feel the right way. I don't need you to always get it right. I don't need, like, I love you. You're good. You make me smile. You give me joy. See, that kind of love, I don't think we understand. Like, we're like, what now? What? How is
Yeah.
this even possible? And so what is God is trying to do here is that he says it's the only thing it's the only thing that has the power to dismantle fear in your life. When you realize, number one, I can fail in this and God's not going to let go of me. Okay, I'm good. I I can go through some really hard time. I can go through, not having enough and not having a good enough job, to being all alone, but I know that he will never leave me, and he's always working for me. He's got my back. Like, when you realize that someone's always got your back, someone always is for you, always rooting for you, always, then I think going through life, you can in fact dismantle some big fears in your life as you move forward. Even when you go through a transition where you find yourself all alone, when you know that God's love is there, there's a sense of companionship, there's a sense of comfort, there's a sense of, like, I'm on sure ground here. I think that's the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. He says, when, like, perfect love casts out all fear. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I love that, and it makes so much sense. And it's like that belonging that we just, crave so much, and yet in our human finite minds, we always think of, like you said, it's like, well, I messed up. Maybe now he doesn't love me anymore because there are humans who have maybe,
Hmm.
loved us less because we've made a mistake or said the wrong thing. And there's literally nothing that we can do that messes up that love that God has for us. And that is such a big concept. We can't even take it all in. Like I'm trying to take that in, and it's so much. And it also speaks to that idea of like belonging because we belong to God. And I think for, one thing that really struck me in the book was where you said you always wanted a tribe and never felt like you fit in. And I think for a lot of listeners of this podcast and people in general, especially those who have been through those big life changes, we really relate to that idea. Why do you think it is that belonging can feel so elusive, even in church settings where it feels like that shouldn't be the case?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think that sometimes when it comes to organized anything, right? Not just
Mhm.
church, there's a sense of everybody needs to like find their spot, find their fit, And some of us, we find ourselves not fitting anywhere,
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I think what happens is sometimes when, especially in the West, when you have these large organizations and large churches, the way they've organized everything is that everything has to have its place.
Mhm.
That's how you manage stuff, right? So you got to have a system of management. Everything's got to be where it needs to be. It's like organizing a big, huge closet, for example. If you are one of those people, everything has a place, but if
I
you
am not
don't,
one of those people.
exactly. So I'm not either, but I'm saying, so if so, what happens? What happens is when you don't have a value of everything has a place, then it's kind of like this beautiful mess, like
Mhm.
this. Hey, it's all here. It's somewhere here. So what happens is that, yeah, I think in organized church sometimes scalability is more important than relatability.
Mm.
So you have to scale a lot. Like the ministry's got to grow, and what the thing is that then people just becomes like these not pawns in a sense, but they do, I guess. They just have to find themselves in certain positions. Like it's all about the position, not the person. And so it's like you got to play this, you got to do this. And so it's easier to go, okay, these are the categories we're going to work with. You're
Yeah.
married, you got these many kids, you fit here, your people go here, you did this, everybody fits in. I mean, suburbia works like that. You know why?
Yep.
Because suburbia is like you like the same things, you are about the same age, your kids go the same thing, and everybody the same, and this is what
Yeah.
you do. It's all cookie. That's how. Guess what? You can have massive the subdivisions. Why? Because we've organized everything. Everybody's in their place. But as soon as you get a mix of people, as soon as you go in one sense in the city, and it's a mix. It's a wild mess, but it's a beautiful mess. And so that's why it's tough in Christianity, depending on the community you go to, if it values scalability versus relatability, you're gonna find that you don't fit. And here's the thing: the big difference, I think, for me is that churches, and I think it's important for people to find communities like that, need to value the sense of family. See, in a family, you don't fit, you just belong.
Right.
Because in a family, and I have two brothers and two sisters, guess what? I mean, I am so different, and they are so different from me. And, my mom and dad, I mean, if they were trying to relate to the three boys that they have and two girls, I mean, they're like, we don't fit. We don't, as in we don't fit because we don't we're not alike in any way, but we still belong. Why? Because we're family. Like, you just, even though you don't fit, you don't, it's not a thing. You belong. And I think trying to get people, pastors, church leaders to value this idea of you just belong, because you're not supposed to be like me to be with me. And family does that. Family says, you don't have to believe like me, be like me to be with me. That
Right.
is belonging. But in church world, sometimes it's like, no, you got to find your fit. That means you got to fit into our theology, you got to fit into our methodology, you got to fit into our community and programs, you got to fit. And if you don't find your fit, go somewhere else.
Right.
So does that make sense? It's like, what? So that's why I felt like I didn't belong, because depending on the kind of church you go to, they go, well, all these people are this skin tone and they have this kind of education and they do da 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 and all that. And I walked in, going, and I was an immigrant, and I was like, I don't even have a people group, because I grew up, I'm Pakistani, but I grew up in the Middle East, and well, there's no, Pakistani, Middle Eastern, ex-Muslim churches that you can all fit in. So I had to go through my own, um, honestly, I had to go through my own journey of trying to conform and always feeling the need to conform. And I think now I'm at a point where, okay, I'm not trying to fit in. I'm not trying to conform. I'm being transformed because I belong.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for, a lot of people listening, they might feel that kind of sense of like, I don't really fit in. I know I've talked to listeners, people I've coached who are, they'll say something like, "Oh, I'm a bit too much for church circles, but I'm a little bit too spiritual to just join secular groups." So how do those people begin to get involved and feel comfortable? I know, like you said, it kind of depends on the church, but what would you suggest to someone who maybe doesn't have the opportunity to find a different church, but they're feeling like they really aren't fitting where they're at?
Man, that's a tough question. Can you give me an easy one? These are all hard questions here.
Sorry.
Man, wow, that's a tough one. Yeah, how do you? Because it is relationships are so hard,
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens is that you kind of meet someone, you're like, "Oh, we're good. We're good. I think we're good. We're on the same page," and then something happens in the world and you're like, "No, we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
No." So then you lose that, and then what do you do? I think the best thing for me, though, is that if I was in that place, and I have been in a certain sense, is I'd start small. I think sometimes the idea, especially people who are either followers of Jesus and then find, who were in one sense in with everybody, and then they all of a sudden find themselves out. I think the best thing to do is not to find a large place or a large group to get in with again.
Mhm.
I think it needs to start with a small group, like a one or two of friends. I think that's the thing that really would help. I know I would do that. I would start small versus going big. Like sometimes in the Christian world, what it seems like is like it seems like saying it, again, it doesn't. I don't think this is what their churches are trying to convey, but it usually happens where people will move into a town, right? And then they go, okay, I need to go find a church. And what they're doing is they're going to go into a church, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go into a large group. So they're like, I'm going to find a large group to belong to.
Mhm.
See what's happening there? Okay. And that's why people go, I just don't know about this. And it takes a very long time for people to get comfortable in a large group. But the in the secular world or real world or whatever, not spiritual world, not Christian world, people don't go into town and all of a sudden join a large organization. Like,
Right.
they don't do that. What they do is they go into town, and then they go into a new city, and then they start meeting smaller groups of people
Mhm.
in restaurants, in lounges, in whatever places, in their gym, or in their gym classes, or at work. They go small. And I think sometimes, honestly, I feel like people who are not necessarily church people have better friendships than church people do, because
Totally.
the church people, sometimes what happens is that they started with a large group, like they came into a large group, and then something happens in the world and someone said something or their idea changes and blah blah blah, something, and then they just leave that large group again. And all the while they think they actually had a group of close knit people, but they really did not. They Because they always went big. Does that make sense? And then
Yeah.
and every group and everything is just big. It's a several people. It's not one, two people. It's just always groups of, thousands or hundreds or dozens. still big, you know? Makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so I think the best thing I would say is you find one or two people that you can actually really do life with and grow with and wrestle through things with. I think that's what I would advise. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that in churches. Like, I think you can do that in churches. You can do it in large churches. You have to, even in that, you have to get small really quick. Maybe,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
definitely. It's hard on a Sunday morning when it's very, everything's sort of scheduled out, even like if you go to a church that has greeting time, it's like 1 minute of greeting, right? So you don't really
right.
have time to build relationship with those seated around you, and it can feel really awkward. I know where I go, I know they mean it very well, but we do that like turn around and say hi to the person next to you, and that just obviously it's kind of awkward for somebody
Yeah.
who's maybe more introverted or just doesn't know anybody and feels uncomfortable. So yeah, going small. I know even, where I go now, it's a pretty big church. And one of the first friends I met, I had moved, after my divorce, I'd moved and had to start over. And I went to an event. It was like a class the church was hosting. And there was a woman, she was sitting on a bench right outside. They hadn't opened the doors yet. I was really early. And I walk up and she goes, "Let me guess. You're one of those people that either you show up really early or really late." And I was like, "Yeah, that is me." And so we just started talking. We both found out we had a lot in common. And it was just that little connection that, we'd both done the same thing, showed up like ridiculously early to get into this event. And yeah, so it's like finding those
Oh,
little
that's great.
moments where you can connect, I think, with,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, one person. I read something recently, I think it was just on Instagram, so who knows how true it is, but I think it's true. It said people to be happy really only need like two or three close friends. You don't necessarily need like a huge community. You just need a few people in your corner.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see that to be true. I think that depending on your personality, I think that you get a joy of having a lot of people kind of know of you,
Mhm.
like, but again, regardless of if you're an introvert or extrovert, it does come down to it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or extrovert, you still need one or two people to really, really know you. And that makes a huge difference
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I really loved about Tomorrow Needs You is where you give us real practical ways to push back against fear, things like gratitude, practicing forgiveness, surrounding ourselves with the right people. Can you actually talk a little bit about gratitude and how that can shift our mindset from fear to faith?
Yes, yes, for sure. Now, gratitude is interesting because it causes someone to really make themselves stop and consider. When kids and parents are out, and I know my kids did this when they were young too. And when someone give them something, and they're like, um, you know, I would say, okay, what do you say? What do you say? It's always thank you, thank you. Now, what's interesting is that even though that was really good to do with the kids, that's not really necessarily gratitude. They weren't expressing gratitude when they said thank you. They were just doing what they were told to do. And so true gratitude is in fact stopping to realize and process what is the significance of that moment. Like, okay, why do you think that, man, God showed up in this way, and how timely it was, and if it didn't happen, what would have happened? Or you feel like, man, this person was, they went out of their way to say something to me, and I'm so grateful for them. Or you stop to consider, man, this person's been in my life for so long and done so many things for me and just been there. Man, I'm so grateful. Or like, I'm so grateful because this person is someone I can be really safe with and open with and be myself with. And so you stop and go, okay, I'm so grateful. See, gratitude changes, it's not a thing for you to do. It changes the kind of person you are. It changes who you are. And so that's why I think gratitude is so important. It's the ability to stop and see something, notice something that you would have not noticed if you would just keep on going and keep on going. It's not like, oh, thank you, I can keep on going. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, no. That's not gratitude. Thanking someone for something that they did, at a grocery store. No, gratitude is stopping and going, hold up, let me just think about this. And so when it comes to the things in our life, it comes to the dark places in our life, my dad, for example, My dad is the reason the title of the book is called Tomorrow Needs You, because he got to a point where he could not see any good things in his life. He was obviously not grateful because he didn't have the power to be grateful. He did not possess that. He was unable to be grateful. It's not because he was mean or anything like that. Darkness and despair, regret and depression will basically cripple you from being someone who has gratitude, who can feel gratitude, who truly feel gratitude. And so he told me once, because he had unfortunately attempted, to take his life, and he was unsuccessful. And we were having a conversation after that, and he's like, "You know what, Naeem? No one needs me." And I'm like, "Dad, what are you talking about? We need you." And he said, "Naeem, you don't need me. I'm useless." And and he was overwhelmed with grief and pain and sorrow and darkness. And the first thing he could not do is he could not see the beautiful things in his life. There's no way, he seemed bitter, and he was bitter. But the problem was, it was not because he wasn't, thankful. It was because he couldn't be thankful. He couldn't have gratitude. It's because he couldn't see. He couldn't see to the things to be grateful for. And so I remember telling him, "Dad, look around, man." And I was like, "Dad, look at your grandkids and look at this. What are you talking about? We all need you." And he could not see it. So that's why my book is called Seeing Beauty When You Feel Hopeless. It's because when you start seeing beauty, that's the first step of going, okay, I can actually become a person of gratitude, because now I have the ability to see something that's beyond my pain, that's beyond that. And it takes a lot of work. That's why I think gratitude it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not as simple as saying thank you, because that's what you're supposed to say. Gratitude is, like, in one sense, a state of being that you constantly become, because you have the ability to look around and see the beautiful things, appreciate the things in your life, forgive yourself of some things, and then you find yourself in a place of gratitude.
I love the idea of it being a state of being that you become, not just like you said, it's not like rattling off a list of thank yous for things
Right.
that, you may or may not even truly feel in that moment when you are trying to
Yeah.
rattle that off.
Yeah. And that's why I was in the book. I talk about how, like, I talk about, so the book is in three sections, right? The first one is Yesterday Has Forgotten You. And I talk about that whole idea of, like, yesterday is, it's like kind of like a relationship, and I liken it to, a relationship that you loved, and it was awesome, great. But you broke up. And the problem is that, we are still thinking about yesterday, Like, if yesterday was a relationship I was involved in, I would say I'm still thinking of her.
Mhm.
And if the girl's name was Yesterday, guess what? Yesterday has forgotten you. Like, yesterday's not thinking of you. And it's tough to think that. You're like, what? I'm not moved on. You've moved on? And sometimes you just have to know that, not sometimes, but a lot of times you have to know this, that the yesterday are gone. And then today is waiting for us, because in the last section is Tomorrow Needs You. And today is waiting for us to confront the things in our lives, the fears, the despair, what we are unable to see. It's like going and saying, okay, how short-sighted am I? Like, what do I not see? What can I not see in my life? It's like going to the doctor. Like, what do I have? So is fear causing my vision to be blurry? Is it the fear of loss or failure or rejection? What is it? And then you go, okay, what do I have to do? And that's the work of, becoming a person that has gratitude. But that means God says, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to create beauty. And so in the book, I talk about, okay, here's the thing, not just knowing all these things, but it's the beautiful things in your life that you put before you that give you the power to dismantle the biggest fears in our lives. So we got to put something so beautiful in front of us that conquers the fear inside of us. And so you and I have to put a beautiful vision, a beautiful relationship, something that we value more in front of us, something that we're moving towards, like where in Hebrews it talks about Jesus, and he says that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And I think that's a secret to us as humans. Like, you have to put a joy so big in front of you, you know? So for Jesus, it was, I imagine, you know, he closed his eyes and he looked and he imagined humanity having an intimate, close relationship with God. And he thought that's worth dying for. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, yeah, that's it. He put a joy before him, so he endured the cross. I have got to put a joy in front of me, the next phase of my life, tomorrow, the beautiful tomorrow in front of me. And I got to put that in front of me and I got to move towards it. And that's going to help me overcome the fact that I don't want to get up in the morning. I can't sleep at night. I've got all these anxiety. Am I ever going to make it? Am I going to be enough? Is someone ever going to love me again? Am I ever going to be successful? Am I ever going to reach this? Like all those things are not fought by faith. They're fought by beauty. And the reason why I say beauty is because you can't call something beautiful without loving it. Have you noticed
Yeah.
that? Like, you know, because when we call something beautiful, we love it. You know, we have an emotional relationship with it. That's why, you know, people will show pictures of, you know, their kids and we're like, oh, look at my beautiful family. And we're like, really? I don't know if they're that beautiful, you know, you know, but they're like, yeah, why do they think they're beautiful? Because they love them. They love them, you
Yep.
know? And so that's why you have to put something so loving, so joyful, so beautiful in front of you. And if when you do that, it will allow you to endure the cross that you have to bear today. So,
Wow. I love that. Now, what would you say to the person who hears this and they're like, yes, I want to do that, but they are struggling to find anything beautiful to put in their mind? They're struggling to find that joy to look forward to. Maybe they are right in the middle of their dumpster fire and they're just
mm,
like, I get it. I want to do that, but I don't know how.
mm. No, that's good. That's really good. So, I mean, going back to your dumpster fire. So, like, I think what's interesting about like diamonds in a dumpster fire, right,
Mhm.
is this idea of like, you know, like there is a refinement to diamonds. Like, like, for example, I think like if I was out and looking for a diamond, I don't know if I would know it was a diamond until it's brushed off, until it's get its work. Like, they've had people do a lot of things to make a diamond look like a diamond, you know?
Yeah.
And the finished product is we're like, oh, that's beautiful. But the beginning product is never. So I think that for people, realistically, I think you don't start with something that's already attractive. You start with something to make it beautiful. Like, so, for example, the last chapter, I talk about how we are the broken becoming beautiful, and that God is making us beautiful because He's wanting us to create beauty. So we are broken, becoming beautiful. So you start with things in your life that are not perfect, but they give you joy. You start with some things that are not that pretty, but you're making them beautiful. You start with something really small that you go, okay, I'm working towards this and I'm going to make it what it is later. Like the first few steps, the first few renditions of whatever is not. I mean, think about your life. Think about the reason why you started this podcast, you know?
Hmm.
And you know this and I know this. And people might not know this. The people, all your fans are like, oh man, oh my gosh, she's so great. She's amazing. She's got it going on. You know that this started really rough. You
Yeah.
know this,
Yep.
right? You know, it was not pretty. It's not pretty. And some days it's not pretty at all, either now, even now.
Yep.
But you're doing it. You're doing the work. And so you're like, I'm going to do this. And why? Because it's the broken becoming beautiful. It's the thing, the dream that you thought of, the idea that you had, and it's growing into something beautiful. But you've got to start somewhere. And sometimes what happens is that people give up. And I'm so glad you did not, because you're like, hey, I got to do this. So when you find something in a dumpster fire, in a sense, you're like, I don't know what this is, but unless you brush it off, unless you kind of start doing some work on it, you don't realize what you've found. You don't
Right.
have fully beautiful, you know, diamonds already set in beautiful rings in dumpster fires. You
Right.
find things, you're like, I don't know if this is even worth saving.
Yeah.
But you start brushing it off, you start working on it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, wow. So I would say, yeah, I would start with, you know, what is something that a person would want? Like, that's why I talk about, you know, my friend in the book, and she went through sexual abuse. I mean, this is a tough book, by the way. Your readers need to know this is a tough one. This book will definitely make you cry, and it's definitely
Yeah.
PG-13. But I mean, you know, she had to she had to surround herself with a beautiful community that would allow her to fight through that. And it just got really rough on certain days, really rough. And for her, because she knew that she had to come out of that, putting something beautiful around her meant she had to be very selective of her friends. And some of the friends she made they were not great, and some were really great. But then when it just clicked, those friends helped her so much because they refused to let her go backwards in her relationships, in her commitments, in what she wanted out of life, you know? So
Yeah.
what did she do? She put a beautiful community in front of her that kind of pulled her into her future. So it's things like that. It's small things, but you got to start with like, what do I want? And I'll tell you what, like I recently did this and it was so strange. It was so strange. I put, what does God like about me? I made a list.
I love
What
that.
does God like about me? Not what does God want me to do? Not what is God telling me? Because our times with guys are always like that, right?
Hmm.
What is, but imagine if you would write a list. What does God like about me? I know he loves me and blah, blah, blah. No. What does he like about me? I think it'd be so hard to do. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like thinking about it right now. I'm like, what would I put on that list? Yeah, because like you said, we're like, oh yeah, God loves us. Like we know that, but then what does he like about me? Does he like the way I laugh? Does he like
Correct.
the way I talk, the jokes I make? Like, yeah, that's interesting to think about it from a standpoint of what does he like? I love that.
Yeah. What does he like? So I think, like, so for me, I brought that up is because when you start asking questions like that, then you start unlocking parts of yourself, and then you actually begin to see a future and the next steps of what you're supposed to do. Like, it's so strange, but like sometimes when you're like, okay, what's my current next career move? What's my next relationship move? What do I need to do? Who do I need to meet? What app do I need to get on? Whatever, what do I need to do? I think sometimes the work of like understanding who you are and who God is in your life allows you to really clarify your next step, even though you're not talking about that next step.
Yeah.
So like when I wrote stuff down and I was like, okay, what does God like about me? I realized stuff about my personality that I know that Jesus likes. And I thought, okay, how can I use this more? What next, you know what I'm saying? What
Yeah.
part of my job, what part of my life, what part of my day can I actually become more of this person?
Oh, I
All of a
love that
sudden,
perspective.
yeah, all of a sudden you go, oh wow, yeah, yeah. Because God wants you to like yourself. I know it's so
Yeah,
weird,
that's
but it's
that's
like,
like but it's so true, and it's like, yeah, I please say that again for people so they can hear it
yeah,
again because I think
yeah.
it's so important.
God wants you to like yourself.
Yeah.
He wants you to. See, I'll say this, okay, really quick. I know this might be unpacking a whole lot, but let's just say this. I don't know about a lot of your listeners, but I know that come moving from a Muslim faith into a Christian faith, one of the biggest things I heard was this idea of original sin. Have you heard of that term before?
Mhm.
So original sin means that you grew up in sin. We were all born as sinners. You've probably heard this in church and all that. And why? It's because of Adam and Eve's story. We were born into sin, all that jazz. Okay.
Mhm.
The problem is that what we don't realize is that in the beginning, the first, like Genesis 1 and then Genesis 3. In between Genesis 1 and 3, we don't realize we don't go backwards. Like for example, our whole born into sin and original sin, and we're terrible people and this and that. That started in the third chapter.
Mm.
The story started with us being good. So when God created us, He said it was good. So there is a big difference when you have a relationship with God that you consistently feel like you have original sin versus you have intrinsic value.
Mm.
So intrinsic value means that you actually believe the story of God from the day one. And day one, God said He made things and then He called them beautiful, called them good, called them good. Then he made all the things and he said, that's really good. So if God created us out of love, he made us good. We turned chapter 3, but our beginning is good. So I understand the theology and blah, blah, blah of, original sin. But there is an intrinsic goodness because you were born, because you could not have been born without God. So you are good. So I wonder what would happen. I have a theory that if we believed we're good first, we wouldn't be trying to always prove to God that we are not bad.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So we would actually live our lives without shame and guilt all the time. Because if you always have shame and guilt, and that's the constant thought that you have, guess what? You end up living a life full of shame and guilt.
Yeah.
Because you can't get out of it. So I think the best thing for us to do is to start with inherent goodness, intrinsic value. We were made good. That's why when Jesus started his ministry, the first thing he did before any miracle is he got baptized. And right after he got baptized, he went to get tempted,
Mm-hmm.
And when we read the temptation story, we go, oh man, Jesus defeated the devil because he defeated him with the Bible and the verses. That's not necessarily true. The reason is because the story says that the devil was just using Old Testament scripture, and so Jesus used Old Testament scripture. That's not how he defeated him, because that was their conversation. How did Jesus defeat the devil? How did he resist being the person less than God wanted him to be? How did he do it? How did he do it? Well, it's very clear, because right before he went to the desert, he got baptized. Okay, what's so important about being baptized? Well, right when he got baptized, one thing happened that had never happened before. All of a sudden, there was a voice that opened up the heavens and said, "This is my son, and he brings me great joy."
Wow.
We miss it.
Yeah, we do.
The first thing that God did was embarrass Jesus. Like, this is my kid. I love him so much. And I'm telling everyone about him. So it wasn't a voice that some heard. All of it. It freaked everybody out. So before Jesus did anything, he knew his dad loved him. So, and then right after that, he goes to get tempted. I think he resisted the devil because he was like, my dad loves me so much.
Wow.
Like, he's already proud of me. So I think if we start with that, our lives change. So anyways, I know we kind of gone off all over the place, but just wanted to make sure your listeners knew that.
I love that. And I think that's such a beautiful way to end this conversation. Naeem, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your story today. I believe this conversation is going to give so many people hope, especially those who are currently walking through fear or loss and wondering if God still has good plans for them.
Man, thank you. It's been a joy. So fun talking to you.
Now, friends, if today's episode spoke to you, I can't recommend Tomorrow Needs You enough. It's full of raw honesty, deep wisdom, and it is such a beautiful reminder that your story isn't over, and the world really is a better place because you're in it. As always, thank you for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If this episode encouraged you, please share it with someone who might need that same reminder. Remember, fear doesn't get the final say, and tomorrow truly does need you. We'll chat next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If today reminded you that resilience is a practice, not a personality trait, you're in the right place. Keep showing up, keep rebuilding, and don't forget, even diamonds start as pressure and mess. For more faith-filled encouragement and real-life tools to help you heal and grow, check out the show notes for some free resources and ways to stay connected. See you next time.